My name is Elena, and for 32 years I was exactly who everyone expected me to be. I was born in Seville, raised in a home that smelled of incense during Holy Week and echoed with flamenco guitars during the April Fair. I was a modern Spanish woman, an architect, independent, secular, and arguably happy. But there is a specific type of silence that exists in a busy life, a silence that hums beneath the noise of dinners, design deadlines, and relationships. I felt like a house with a beautifully painted facade but no foundation. It didn't start with a person. It started with a building. As an architect, I was assigned to a restoration project in Granada, working on a minor palace in the Albaicin district. The structure was centuries old, dating back to the time of Al-Andalus. My job was to study the geometric patterns of the tiling, the zelle. Day after day, I stared at these infinite, repeating patterns. In Western art, the focus is usually on the human form, the ego, the face. But here, in these tiles, there was no beginning and no end. It was all centering toward a unity I couldn't understand. I found myself tracing the lines with my fingers, feeling a strange sense of order trying to communicate with my chaotic internal world. One afternoon, during a break, I sat on the roof terrace overlooking the Alhambra. The sun was setting, turning the stone walls into burning gold. Then, the sound cut through the air. The Adhan. The call to prayer from the mosque nearby. I had heard it 1,000 times in movies or on the news, usually accompanied by negative subtitles. But here, alone on a roof in Granada, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a cry of longing. Hayya alal falah. Come to success. I didn't know what it meant then, but the melody pulled at something in my chest so hard that I found myself weeping. I wiped the tears away quickly, terrified that my colleagues would see me. Why was I crying over a chant in a language I didn't speak? That night, I did something I thought I would never do. I went to a bookstore and bought a Spanish translation of the Quran. I hid it under a stack of architectural magazines in my apartment, feeling like I was smuggling contraband. I told myself it was for historical research for my project. I opened it expecting to find anger. I expected to find the rigid, oppressive rulebook that the media had warned me about. Instead, I found the chapter of Mary. I read about Jesus, spoken of with such tenderness and respect, but described as a prophet, a man, not a god. For the first time, the logic clicked. I had always struggled with the Trinity. The math never worked for me. But here, the concept of God was absolute, singular, and undivided. Tawhid. The word I had seen in the geometric tiles was now on the page. For 3 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was Elena the architect, drinking coffee with coworkers and complaining about the government. By night, I was a seeker. I scoured the internet, watching videos of converts, listening to lectures on theology, and learning the movements of the prayer. I tried to pray in my living room, locking the door and turning off my phone. The first time I put my forehead on the floor, that position of total submission, my ego revolted. It felt humiliating. I was a proud European woman. We do not bow. But as I held the position, the humiliation dissolved into relief. It was as if I was physically handing over the heavy baggage I had been carrying for years. I wasn't in charge of the universe anymore. I didn't have to be. The crisis came during a family Sunday lunch back in Seville. My mother had made pork loin. It was my favorite. I sat there, staring at the meat, feeling a physical revulsion I couldn't explain. I realized then that this wasn't just an intellectual exercise anymore. It was rewriting my DNA. I made an excuse that my stomach hurt and ate only salad. My mother asked if I was seeing someone, if that's why I was acting strange. I almost laughed. I was seeing someone, but not in the way she thought. I was finally seeing myself. I returned to Granada with a heavy heart. I knew I believed. I knew that there was no God but the one God, and I knew Muhammad was his messenger. But the cost terrified me. Spanish identity is deeply woven with history, the Reconquista, the expulsion of the Moors. To become Muslim felt like betraying my ancestors. I felt like I was defecting to the other side. One evening, I was walking through the Albaicin again, the narrow white streets winding like a maze. I ended up at the gates of the Great Mosque of Granada. I stood there for 20 minutes, just watching people go in. Men in jeans, women in business suits, people in traditional robes. A mix of Spaniards, Moroccans, converts, and travelers. I was about to turn around and run back to the safety of my old life when a woman stepped out. She was Spanish, wearing a hijab, carrying a grocery bag. She looked at me, saw the panic in my eyes, and didn't preach. She just smiled and said, "The view of the sunset is better from the garden inside. You should come in." That simple invitation broke the dam. I walked in. The mosque didn't smell like incense. It smelled of musk and clean wool. It was quiet, but a living quiet. I sat in the back of the prayer hall. The woman, whose name was Aisha, sat beside me. She didn't ask me what I was doing there. She just waited. "I think I'm Muslim," I whispered. My voice shook so hard the words barely came out. "But I'm scared I'll lose everything. I'm scared I won't be Spanish anymore." Aisha looked at the tile work on the wall, the same patterns I had been studying. "Elena," she said, "look at this building. This is Spanish history. Islam isn't foreign here. It's in the walls. It's in the language. You aren't leaving your culture. You are reclaiming a lost part of it. And even if you lose the whole world, if you find the truth, you have lost nothing." Her words cut the last tether holding me back. I asked her what I needed to do. She called the imam, a kind man with a gentle face. We sat on the carpet. The sun had gone down, and the room was dim, lit only by soft lamps. I repeated the Arabic words after him. "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness that there is no deity but God. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God." It is a cliché to say that the world changed in that moment, but the world didn't change. I did. It was a physical sensation, like cool water washing over a burn. The anxiety that had been the background noise of my life for 32 years simply stopped. I felt light. The days that followed were a whirlwind of awkward adjustments. Learning to wrap a scarf was a comedy of errors. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself, yet somehow, the eyes looking back were clearer. The hardest part was telling my parents. I drove to Seville a week later. I didn't wear the hijab to the house. I wasn't ready for that battle yet. We sat in the living room, the TV playing in the background. "Mom, Dad, I have something to tell you," I said. They looked worried, expecting a pregnancy or a job loss. "I have converted to Islam." The silence was deafening. My father stood up and walked out of the room. My mother cried. She asked where she had gone wrong, asked if I was joining a sect, asked if I was going to move to the desert. It was brutal. I stayed calm, something I never would have been able to do before. I explained that I was still Elena. I still loved them. I was just trying to be a better human being. That was 6 months ago. It hasn't been a fairy tale. Some friends stopped calling. My father is still cold to me, though my mother is slowly coming around, especially when she sees that I am kinder, more patient, and more attentive to her than I was before. She noticed I stopped drinking, stopped gossiping, and started visiting more. "If this religion makes you treat me like this," she finally said last week, "then maybe it isn't as bad as on the news." I still work as an architect. Now, when I look at the restoration projects, I see more than just geometry. I see the intention. I see the dhikr, the remembrance of God, frozen in stone. I walk through the streets of Granada with my head covered, and sometimes people stare. Sometimes they shout things. But it doesn't touch me the way it would have. I carry a fortress inside me now. Yesterday, I went back to that roof where I first heard the Adhan. The sun was setting again, painting the Alhambra in that same burning gold. The call to prayer rang out. This time, I didn't cry in confusion. I stood up, faced the Qibla, and raised my hands. I was Elena, I was Spanish, and I was Muslim. For the first time in my life, all the pieces fit. I finally knew who I was.